Okay, the third example that we've got here is actually a non-monic quadratic. So actually, there's a couple extra steps that we need to go through in order to factorize it. Let's have a look at what we need to do. So step number one is to take the coefficient of the x squared, so the 2, and times it by the constant on the end, so the 5. What that does is it gives us the product that we need to be looking for. So our product needs to be 10 this time, and then the sum, similar to before, is just the coefficient of the x term in the middle, so the 7 that we've got there. So what we need to do is think about two numbers that will multiply to give us positive 10, but they need to add to give us positive 7. And essentially, when you go through your different pairs, 5 and 2 are the two numbers that will work. Now, unfortunately, it's not quite as simple as just putting those in the bracket like before. There's a couple extra steps. This method is called splitting the middle term. So what I mean by that is you're going to take that 7x and you're going to rewrite it using the two numbers that we just said. So we said the pair that will work for that sum and product of 7 and 10 is 5 and 2. So we're going to rewrite the 7x as a 5x and a 2x. And then we're just going to drop down the 2x squared that we had in the original question, and the constant 5, we'll drop that down as well. Then what you're going to do is some single bracket factorisation. So you're going to take the first two terms that you've got, so you've got this 2x squared plus 5x, and you are going to factorise those into a single bracket. So this is a foundation level skill that's not being covered in the higher course, but you can look back at that lesson if you need to. So to factorise these two terms into a single bracket, I just need to think about what factors they have in common. And the only thing that they have in common here is an x. So I'm going to start by putting an x on the outside, and then what do I times x by to get 2x squared? Well, I times it by 2x. What do I times x by to get 5x? I times it by 5. So that is for the first two terms. Then for the second two terms, exactly the same idea again. I am going to factorise those two into a single bracket. But what we notice at this stage is that they do not have anything in common apart from the factor 1. So all that we can factorise out is a 1, which seems a little bit pointless, but you'll see where this is going in a second. And there's a really clever trick that we can do at this stage. We should have the exact same thing in both brackets. And if you look, in green there, we've got 2x plus 5 in the first bracket, and in the red, we've got a 2x plus 5 as well. So we've passed that check. We haven't made a mistake so far. Then all that you do for your final step is you take what's on the outside of both the brackets. So I've got an x on the outside of the first one, and I've got a positive 1 on the outside of the second. That goes in your first bracket, and then in the other bracket, you just put the shared bracket, which is the 2x plus 5. And then you factorise your non-monic quadratic. So there are quite a few steps to doing that, but those steps stay exactly the same on every single non-monic quadratic, and they will always work. So let's see that again with the fourth example that we've got here. Let's test if you can remember the steps. So have a think about what the first step was. It was taking the coefficient of the p squared term, the quadratic term there, and timesing it by the constant on the end. So I take my 5, times it by minus 6, which gives me minus 30, and that's the product number that I need to be using. The sum is just the coefficient of the middle term, so the minus 13. And then I need to think of two numbers that match that criteria. So they need to multiply to minus 30, but they need to add to minus 13. Pair of numbers that will work. Maybe you've spotted it, maybe you haven't. Don't worry too much at this stage. You just go through some different numbers, see which works. I can see that minus 15 and plus 2 will work though. So we're going to take the middle term and we're going to split it. That's why it's called splitting the middle term. So we're going to rewrite minus 13 with those two numbers that we just said. So minus 15, add 2. And then we drop down the 5p squared, drop down the minus 6 as well, And then we're just going to do some factorising into a single bracket again. So first two terms, start with those. I can see this time that I can take a 5 and a p out. In the bracket, I'd need a p and a -3. And then for the second one, we know that the brackets need to be the same. So I could actually start by putting that bracket in if I wanted to. So a p -3, and then I just need to think, right, what do I need to put on the outside of the bracket in order to get a 2p -6? Well, of course, hopefully you can spot it's just going to be a 2 on the outside. If you were to expand that, you would indeed get your 2p -6. And I'll just highlight those to show the difference. And now we've done all the hard work. Final step is simply to take the coefficients of the brackets, so the 5p and the +2, they go in a bracket together, and then the shared bracket is just the other bracket. And then we factorised our non-monic quadratic.